Yeah, one of the most enjoyable parts of being in elected office for 22 years was the opportunity to speak to young people. And I always enjoyed being invited to speak to high school students and college students. And most of the time I talked about the status of women in the United States, the history, where we were in terms of laws, and what laws we still needed on the books. And I would talk about women's right to vote. And the kids would always look at me like I was talking about ancient history, that this was something that was way in our past, that women have had the right to vote forever. And I would explain to them that my own grandmothers were not able to vote when they turned 21. And then I would tell them a story about a woman I met when I was 16 years old. My dad was involved in politics, so I always tagged along on election day and always worked at one of the campaign headquarters. And I was really happy because I finally had my driver's license and I would be able to drive people to the polls instead of doing the boring work at the headquarters. So a call came in from a woman who told us that she was 93 years old, she was blind, and she wanted to go vote, and she needed a ride. So of course I volunteered to take her. She also explained that she had 5 cats that she would not leave at home alone. So whoever was driving her would have to take the cats too. So that was okay. It was pouring down rain to make things worse. But I got to her house, I got her in the car, and I made 5 more trips, got cats in the car. They were not happy. But we got to the polling place, I got her inside, she voted. And she got back into the car, it's driving her home, and she leaned over and she poked me in the shoulder. And she said, "Dearie, have you voted today?" And I said, "No, actually, I'm not old enough to vote yet." And she said, "Well, when you are, you promise me that you'll never miss an election." And I said, "Okay, but why is that?" And she said, "Because I went to jail to give you that right." And I have never forgotten that woman in all these years since, and I have never missed an election because of her. Thinking about her having gone to jail in New York City with hundreds of others who were mocked and jailed and force-fed and disowned by their families, just ostracized from society. I always believe that I owe them a debt, and especially my little old 93-year-old lady with 5 cats. It wasn't until 1997 that I finally came to hear about the role that African American women played in the suffrage movement in the United States. You know, growing up, you hear about Susan B. Anthony. Not that you get a lot of that in history, but the little bit that you get, you hear mostly about the Susan B. Anthony's and her circle. But I had never heard about any African American women being involved until 1997, when a woman by the name of Mary Ann Shadd Carey was inducted into the Delaware Women's Hall of Fame. And I happened to be being inducted at the same time, so I came to know a little bit about Mary Ann Shadd Carey. She was born in Wilmington, Delaware in 1823, and she was an amazing woman, an extraordinary Black woman who became the first Black female to publish a newspaper in North America. She became the first, one of the first African American women to earn a law degree in the United States, which she did at the age of 59. Her family, when she was growing up in Wilmington, her family had sheltered runaway slaves in their home, and so they risked their lives in the cause of ending slavery. So she had been an abolitionist. She was a women's rights person. She used her newspaper publishing to further the causes that she believed in. She recruited Black soldiers for the Union Army. She opened a school to teach the children of freed slaves. She was just this amazing woman who later moved to Canada. And in Canada, she continued her fight for equality here in the United States. And she had a school in Canada, and she's honored there. There's a statue of her in Canada, but there was nothing here in the United States or here in Delaware, her hometown. And it wasn't until this past February that she was finally honored, thanks to a resolution introduced by our own African-American Congresswoman, Lisa Blunt Rochester. And that resolution called for the Wilmington Post Office to be renamed in Mary Ann Shadd Carey's honor. And so finally here in her hometown, she is finally recognized in a very public way. And I think it's important to remember the Mary Ann Shadd Careys, who were often alone in their fight because they were sometimes not welcomed by the white women in the suffrage movement, but nonetheless they plugged along and did what they could by themselves. And as a result of all that, there was finally success in the passage of the 19th Amendment. So I think it's important we remember those women, especially because we stand on their shoulders.